Hello everybody and welcome to A Story of Light, a live stream musical journey in 19 days. It's day 20 because in my attempt to squeeze all this history into 19 days, I actually ended up needing an extra day to bring our story to a close. But I thought, since it's March 20th, it's Nowruz, the 19-day fast is over, I thought it would be really nice to actually do a final episode on the day of Nowruz itself. So happy Nowruz, everybody. I realise that depending on where you're watching from and what time zone you're in, it may already be March 21st for some of you, but wherever you are and whatever date it is in your time zone, I hope that you're enjoying this very special time of year during this very special year of the centenary of the passing of Abdu'l-Baha. And first, before anything, I want to thank you all for joining me on this incredible journey over the past 20 days. This has just been such an incredibly, really, it's been a huge privilege for me to share this story with you and really to share what I've been learning about the story of Abdu'l-Baha in the process of making this new album. And I have to say that my understanding of this story over the past 19 days has developed immensely, as has my appreciation of the significance of this year of the centenary. And so I want to thank you all for giving me the opportunity to really to improve my understanding of this really incredible story. So I want to give a major thank you to my patrons who support my work. It's entirely because of you that all of this is possible. You have enabled me to come to the studio every day and do these live streams, and really it's it's just it's really thanks to your support that this has all been possible, and it's thanks to your support that this new album is being made in honor of Abdu'l-Baha this year. So I consider you all my collaborators, and I send you my deepest gratitude. And speaking of collaborators, I have to say a very special thank you to the man behind this camera right here, Antimo Kelly-Puka, here at AP Studios, who has been unbelievably dedicated to making this all happen, and having me here every day to go live and setting all of this up at the highest standard possible in such a way that I didn't have to worry at all about all the tech stuff, which I'm sure you all can appreciate is actually very complicated, but I could just come here and focus on the storytelling and singing the songs. And Antimo, on behalf of everyone watching, thank you. So I have to say, Antimo, over the past several months, has actually been an amazing collaborator, because he has been engineering and co-producing the new album with me here in Dublin, and we've been working remotely with Xiao An Lee over in Singapore, who is also co-producing and doing the string arrangements, and we've been working back and forth on the album, and needless to say, we are all extremely excited to share the new album with you very soon. And so on that note, I want to announce to you the release date for the new album. So Home of Light is actually going to have a slow release. It's going to be released one song at a time throughout the year, and that process is going to begin on May 22nd, because as you will know from our story, May 22nd was the night in 1844 when the Bab declared his mission, and really that was the night that our story began. But as you'll remember from the story, Abdu'l-Baha himself was actually born on that very same night in 1844, and so I'm going to release the first song from the album on or around May 22nd, and from that time onwards a new song from the album will be released every 3 to 4 weeks, all the way up to November, when the album will be released in full as a complete piece, a few weeks in advance of the centenary of the passing of Abdu'l-Baha itself. So with all that said, let's begin our final chapter of A Story of Light. So I'm going to use my notes today, because this was a kind of an extra addition to add this final episode as a 20th day. So yesterday we looked at how after his travels, Abdu'l-Baha had returned to the Holy Land, and while World War I was erupting around him, he had penned his divine plan, and he had sent that plan specifically to the Baha'is of North America, laying out the steps, the necessary steps to build Baha'u'llah's unique, wondrous system from the grassroots and to lay the foundations for universal peace. But Abdu'l-Baha had seen the war coming, and he had returned from his travels really just as the tensions between the nations of the world were about to just erupt like a powder keg. And he knew that the Middle East would be in a particularly precarious position, possibly even resulting in a breakdown of food supplies for the people of Palestine. And so, on his return from his travels, Abdu'l-Baha slowly, purposefully, and in such a way as to cause no unnecessary alarm to anybody, began to send the various Baha'i pilgrims who had come to the Holy Land from the East and the West back to their respective countries. And by the time the war broke out in the summer of 1914, Abdu'l-Baha had reduced the number of visitors all the way to zero. But most impressively of all, he had taken strategic measures to build up food supplies for the people of Palestine. And as a result of his foresight and his preemptive actions in the lead up to the outbreak of World War I, Abdu'l-Baha quite literally saved the people of Palestine from starvation. And like the captain of a ship, he steered that entire country not only through the catastrophe of World War I, but also, quite poignant to our times, also through the great pandemic of 1918 to 1920 that immediately followed the war. And so we've now finally arrived in the year 1921. And I'll see if I can get through this bit without breaking up too much. But it was 1921, and that little 8-year-old boy named Abbas, who all those years before had been so profoundly affected by the sight of his father weighed down by chains at the Black Pit of Tehran, was now 77 years old. And throughout his entire life, he had barely known a single day of comfort or rest. And yet, he had spent every day of that life striving to give comfort and rest to others. And in spite of all the difficulties that he had faced, the repeated exiles and imprisonments that he had shared with his parents and his siblings, the betrayal by his brother, and the looming threat of execution by the Sultan, Abdu'l-Baha had lived his life with this seemingly infinite inner supply of joyfulness and lightness and humour that just welled up out of him and flowed out to everyone that he met. And although in his later years he naturally began to show some signs of tiredness, he showed no indication of ever stopping this life of service to others that he had lived. And so on November 27th, 1921, Abdu'l-Baha went about his day as normal, feeding the poor, visiting the sick, giving counsel to whoever needed it. He even conducted the wedding of some friends in Akka. But in hindsight, it became clear to others that Abdu'l-Baha had known that November 27th would be his last day. And in God Passes By, Shoghi Effendi describes the final moments of Abdu'l-Baha's life. So Antimo, can you put up the first slide, please? At 1:15 a.m., November 28, he arose and, walking to a table in his room, drank some water and returned to bed. Later on, he asked one of his 2 daughters who had remained awake to care for him to lift up the net curtains, complaining that he had difficulty in breathing. Some rose water was brought to him, of which he drank, after which he again lay down, and when offered food, distinctly remarked, "You wish me to take some food, and I am going." A minute later, his spirit had winged its flight to its eternal abode, to be gathered at long last to the glory of his beloved Father, and taste the joy of everlasting reunion with him. And the following morning, November 28th, the news of the passing of Abdu'l-Baha spread throughout the region in what seemed like an instant. And while the family was making arrangements for the funeral, crowds of people, arriving literally in thousands by the hour, descended on the city of Haifa to mourn the loss of the one who, whatever their persuasion, they had universally come to know as the Master. There were Persians and Arabs, Turks and Armenians, Syrians, Europeans, Africans, Asians and Americans, Jews, Christians, Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists, Druzes, these people who for so many years had received from Abdu'l-Baha guidance or wisdom or friendship or food or shelter or clothes, or even just the simple company they needed in their periods of loneliness or the struggles of their lives. All these people, a crowd of 10,000, stood in the streets of Haifa to grieve their common loss. And Shoghi Effendi, along with Lady Blomfield, wrote the following. So Antimo, can you put up the next slide, please? The eyes that had always looked out with loving kindness upon humanity, whether friends or foes, were now closed. The hands that had ever been stretched forth to give alms to the poor and the needy, the halt and the maimed, the blind, the orphan and the widow, had now finished their labour. The feet that with untiring zeal had gone upon the ceaseless errands of the Lord of compassion were now at rest. The lips that had so eloquently championed the cause of the suffering sons of men were now hushed in silence. The heart that had so powerfully throbbed with wondrous love for the children of God was now stilled. His glorious spirit had passed from the life of earth, from the persecutions of the enemies of righteousness, from the storm and stress of well-nigh 80 years of indefatigable toil for the good of others. And it was decided that the body of Abdu'l-Baha should be laid to rest in its own room inside the shrine of the Bab. And so this vast funeral procession of 10,000 people carried the coffin up the mountain to that sacred spot chosen by Baha'u'llah. And I found this beautiful description of the funeral of Abdu'l-Baha in a biography of him by H.M. Balyuzi, which I highly recommend if you want to read his biography. So Antimo, can you put up the next slide, please? In the land that we know as the Holy Land, in all its turbulent history of the last 2,000 years, there had never been an event which could unite all its inhabitants of diverse faiths and origins and purposes in a single expression of thought and feeling, as did the passing of Abdu'l-Baha. Tenderly was the sacred coffin placed upon a plain table covered with a fair white linen cloth. As the vast concourse pressed round the tabernacle of his body, waiting to be laid in its resting place within the vault next to that of the Bab, representatives of the various denominations, Muslims, Christians and Jews, all hearts being ablaze with fervent love of Abdu'l-Baha, some on the impulse of the moment, others prepared, raised their voices in eulogy and regret, paying their last homage of farewell to their loved one. So united were they in their acclamation of him as the wise educator and reconciler of the human race in this perplexed and sorrowful age, that there seemed to be nothing left for the Baha'is to say. And so today I thought I could do no better than to finish our story by sharing with you a few portions of some of the speeches that were given on the day of Abdu'l-Baha's funeral, a day in which the boundaries between people of different faiths just seemed to melt away into an atmosphere of universal love, which had been the motivating force of Abdu'l-Baha's life. So, Antimo, if you could put up the first couple of slides, please. So firstly, a representative of the Muslim community, the famous orator Yusuf al-Khatib, gave the following speech. O concourse of Arabians and Persians, whom are ye bewailing? Is it he who but yesterday was great in his life, and is today in his death greater still? Shed no tears for the one who hath departed to the world of eternity, but weep over the passing of virtue and wisdom, of knowledge and generosity. Look to your right, look to your left, look east and look west, and behold what glory and greatness have vanished. What a pillar of peace hath crumbled, what eloquent lips are hushed. Alas, in this tribulation there is no heart but aches with anguish, no eye but is filled with tears. Woe unto the poor, for lo, goodness hath departed from them. Woe unto the orphans, for their loving father is no more with them. Could the life of Sir Abdu'l-Baha Abbas have been redeemed by the sacrifices of many a precious soul, they of a certainty would gladly have offered up their lives for his life. What am I to set forth the achievements of this leader of mankind? They are too glorious to be praised, too many to recount. He has left in every heart the most profound impression, on every tongue most wondrous praise, and he that leaveth a memory so lovely, so imperishable, he indeed is not dead. Next, a representative of the Christian community, the famous writer Ibrahim Nasser, stood up and said the following. Oh, bitter is the anguish caused by this heart-rending calamity. It is not only our country's loss, but a world affliction. Hear me, O people, Abbas is not dead, neither hath the light of Baha been extinguished. Nay, nay, this light shall shine with everlasting splendour. We say farewell to the material body of our Abbas, and his material body vanisheth from our gaze, but his reality, our spiritual Abbas, will never leave our minds, our thoughts, our hearts, our tongues. And next, a representative of the Jewish community of Haifa, Solomon Buzaglo, said the following. So, next one. Abbas has passed away in Haifa, in Palestine, in the Holy Land, wherein prophets have always appeared. We are not the only ones who weep for him, in whom we take pride. In Europe, in America, in every country, people athirst for social justice and brotherhood also weep for him. He suffered from despotism, fanaticism, and intolerance. For decades, Akka, the Bastille of the Ottomans, held him a prisoner. Baghdad, the Abbasid capital, also served as a prison for him and for his father. Persia, the ancient cradle of divine philosophy, threw out her children, whose ideas were conceived in her land. He who has left such a glorious heritage is not dead. He who has promulgated such great principles is immortal in the memory of posterity. And so there were many more tributes that were given that day on the slopes of Mount Carmel, but I think there's no better way to finish our story than to read Shoghi Effendi's definitive description of who and what Abdu'l-Baha was. So, Antimo, if you can put up the next slide, please. He is, and should for all time be regarded, first and foremost, as the centre and pivot of Baha'u'llah's peerless and all-enfolding covenant, his most exalted handiwork, the stainless mirror of his light, the perfect exemplar of his teachings, the unerring interpreter of his word, the embodiment of every Baha'i ideal, the incarnation of every Baha'i virtue, the most mighty branch sprung from the ancient root, the limb of the law of God, the being round whom all names revolve, the mainspring of the oneness of humanity, the ensign of the most great peace, the moon of the central orb of this most holy dispensation. Styles and titles that are implicit and find their truest, their highest and fairest expression in the magic name, Abdu'l-Baha. He is, above and beyond these appellations, the mystery of God, an expression by which Baha'u'llah himself has chosen to designate him, and which, while it does not by any means justify us to assign to him the station of prophethood, indicates how, in the person of Abdu'l-Baha, the incompatible characteristics of a human nature and superhuman knowledge and perfection have been blended and are completely harmonized. And so, with the passing of Abdu'l-Baha 100 years ago in 1921, we've come to the end of our journey, but not the end of the story itself, because just as Baha'u'llah had done before him, Abdu'l-Baha provided, in his own will and testament, the means by which his father's faith would continue to be unbreakably united and forever protected from schism. Abdu'l-Baha himself named someone to come after him, someone to carry his father's faith forward into the future and to be a guardian and protector to the Baha'is. And that person was none other than the very man who has been guiding us through this story, the author of God Passes By, Abdu'l-Baha's own grandson, Shoghi Effendi. And of course, the story of Shoghi Effendi is a story for another time, but suffice it to say that if it weren't for Shoghi Effendi, I wouldn't be here telling this story or even singing these songs. And I often think that after all that the Bab and Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Baha had done, it is really thanks to Shoghi Effendi that I ever heard this story at all. And so I'd like to sing one final song for you, but before I do, I want to thank you all again for joining me on this journey. It has been such a really incredible experience to do this over the past few weeks. And again, I thank my patrons from the bottom of my heart for supporting me and enabling me to do this work. I thank Antimo for collaborating with me in this and making it all possible. I want to thank my family for their endless support that I really couldn't do anything without them. And there are just a few people that I just want to give a special thank you to. Firstly, I want to thank the Badian family, who over the past few years gave me a base from which to work and develop what I was doing at their home in Oregon. I miss you all, and I'm sending you so much love from here in Dublin. I want to thank the Tofig family, who a year ago gave me a space with a piano to start the process of making the new album, of composing. And I want to give a special thank you to Stephen Ader and Charlene Magsy, who last year gave me a home when I got stranded mid-tour in San Francisco. And they not only hosted me for 4 months in their home, but they also provided me with a creative space in which I could compose the new songs for the album and also research this story so that I could share it all with you. So, Steve and Charlene, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for for taking in a stranded musician and helping me with to do all this. So I love you both, and I hope that we will meet again soon. So with all that said, I'd like to bring A Story of Light to a close with this last song, which the lyrics of which were very much inspired by the example of Abdu'l-Baha. So thank you all. Happy Nowruz to everybody, and this is called Have You Heard? of the troubles of Moses. So much light on the earth he did share. Well, all the people, they rose up against him, and they rained down their darts on his head. And he came with a message of peace, love, and justice, and the promise of a great one to come, when the wolf and the lamb will dwell together, and the whole human race will be one. Now, have you heard of the sufferings of Jesus? How pure and selfless he was. Well, all the people, they rose up against him, and put God's only Son on a cross. And he came with a message of peace, love, and justice, and the promise of a great one to come, when on earth it will be as in heaven, and the whole human race will be one. Have you heard of the struggles of Krishna, when he rode with armies of justice at his side? Well, all the people, they rose up against him, and they strove with hordes of darkness to put out his light. And he came with a message of peace, love, and justice, and the promise of a great one to come, when this old dark world will be lit up from all horizons, and the whole human race will be one. Have you heard of the sorrows of Buddha. When he looked at the sadness of man, well, all the people, they rose up against him and put nothing but sadness in his hands. And he came with a message of peace, love, and justice, and the promise of a great one to come, when peace shall reign on earth forever, and the whole human race will be one. Now, have you heard of the woes of Muhammad? All the bruises and abuses he bore. Well, all the people, they rose up against him, and they closed in his face every door. And he came with a message of peace, love, and justice, and the promise of a great one to come, when all the people will be gathered together, and the whole human race will be one. Now I don't ask you to believe me when I tell you Baha'u'llah has come. I just ask you, my brother, to see me. And the whole human race as one. No, I don't ask you to believe me when I tell you Baha'u'llah has come. I just ask you, my sister, to see me. And the whole human race as one, as one.